questions of like, well, what do I do with my arousal?
Yeah.
What do I do with my desire? Again, those are parts of a whole, but those aren't what make you a sexual being.
Yes, true.
So I think when you put those in their proper place and then get some good education about what's the difference between desire and arousal.
Yeah.
I mean, that in and of itself.
Yeah, we can hang out there for a little bit.
Understanding what arousal is takes some, I think it takes some pressure off. It's like, oh, it's not something that I am creating.
Yeah.
It's something that I am responding to.
Yep.
Right. And it's something biological that's just that's happening in my body.
Arousal and desire. Arousal being our response to something.
The physiological, like your body's
right.
response.
Our physiological response. So that means I don't have to necessarily be attracted to be aroused.
That's correct.
Yeah. With me having to relearn, reprocess, rethink what sex was, that was like taking a part of my identity away.
Just because you may need to seek help or you may be in transition and things may not be right, it doesn't necessarily mean that your marriage is bad.
Marriage is a roller coaster ride that never ends.
From the twists of having children, to the turns of overly involved parents, or the highs of buying a new home, to the lows of unexpected lifestyle changes.
Marriage is dope, but let's be honest, fam. Marriage really be tiring.
Welcome to the Left Hand Gang podcast, hosted by Jazz and Spoon.
Yo, what's good, everybody? It is the Left Hand Gang podcast. Normally, Jazz would say something right there, but she ain't gonna hang out with us today. I actually have a special guest with me, a dear friend, Miss Anna Stubbs. But before we get into having her and me introducing her, I just want to say thank you guys. Appreciate you guys so much who've been tuned in, who've been listening, watching us, and all of that. I know that you guys have been really enjoying the guests we've been having. From my girl Sika talking about her story about being divorced and co-parenting. My man Carrington Brown came in and dropped some gems, and just so many others that have come in to be our guests and to hopefully, be a blessing to you in your life and everything. And we thank you guys so much for your continued prayers for me and Jasmine, with us being pregnant with number 2 on the way. Y'all keep your girl Jazz in prayer because she tired, y'all. She is. So with no further ado, so today we have my friend, my colleague, sister, my girl, Anna Stubbs. Anna, how are you doing today?
I'm good. I'm excited to be here. We've just had a whole conversation about this mic.
Yeah, and then you back up from it.
And then I did. I guess I do have a thing with mics.
Yeah, maybe. So how you living today? How are things?
Good. Things are going really well. 2024 is treating me pretty well.
Really? Well, can I get some of that to rub off on me?
Sure. Here. Have. I'm not really sure how to do that, but you're welcome to have some of that juju. Have as much as you want. Yeah, you're good.
Awesome. So, Anna, tell us a little bit about yourself. Who you are, what set you claim, who do you beat up, all those things.
Yeah, beating up is a good term. So, I guess for your listeners, that's who. So I'm this is interesting.
Yep.
This is new for me.
And I said, do you have issues
I didn't
with
think
microphones?
I did. I was like, this is very close to my, I think I don't want to hit it with my nose.
Oh, you're fine.
I have the privilege of working, obviously with you at Aspen House Associates in Richardson. So, faith-based counseling and coaching practice. I am a marriage and family therapist. So I primarily offer counseling and coaching services. Also a certified sex therapist as well. So that's kind of primarily the work that I do.
A sexy person.
Okay,
we can talk about that later.
Yeah, we will. For sure. It definitely influences a lot of the work that I do. And hopefully the project that we'll get to talk a little bit more about, the premarital stuff. So I do counseling and coaching services, EMDR trained, so offer individual couples services. And I can do family. I don't, primarily do a lot of family work, but can do family work as well. So it's a little bit about me.
Man, okay. So thanks for sharing the career side.
Yeah.
But who's the person?
Oh, you're so kind. Yeah. So I am married to my husband, Jordan.
Jordan. Shout out my man, Jordan. That's my dog.
Yeah. Jordan and I have been married for 11 years.
Wow. 11 years.
11 years.
He must really like you.
He must. I mean, yeah, I guess he does. He's still around.
Yeah.
So we have a almost 3-year-old little girl. We've love her. So at this time, no pets. Love dogs, love cats, but just don't currently have any.
None of those things.
None of those things. For those of you that have kids, I'm sure you get it, but I just don't have the energy for that. So working full time, being a wife and being a mom, it's a lot. Yeah. So yeah, that's a little bit about me.
Okay. Well,
believer, Christian.
Yep. Okay.
I love Jesus. It's a
she
big part of
loves
my life.
the Lord.
Love the Lord.
Loving the Lord. That's a blessing. So licensed marriage family therapist. So what typically walks in your office?
As a certified sex therapist and as a faith-based counselor, I'm not
sex therapist and faith.
Sex and faith.
Okay.
Yeah, it's an interesting
That's
combination
spicy.
there. It's spicy. I think it's unique. You just don't have, you don't see a lot of that. And so I'm really grateful to be able to work with a population of people who don't have or haven't had a space to be able to talk about sex and their faith. And so primarily I do work with couples, married couples, who are having a lot of times differences in desire that cause disruption or cause, what's the word I'm looking for? Distress in their relationship. Okay. So see a lot of that for individuals. Also, I'm able to work with individuals and couples who struggle with sexual dysfunction. So, men that are struggling with ED or premature ejaculation, we work with pain. So women and men. I haven't worked with a lot of men that struggle with pain or discomfort there, but women
like
who
pelvic floor. Okay.
Yeah, pelvic floor discomfort or pain, sexual pain, that kind of thing. That kind of primarily that's what I see. And as a trauma specialist, I do see a lot of sexual trauma, things like that as well. Man,
I just feel like you threw up like 1,000 boards, and I want to throw a dart at every last one of them.
We totally can.
Man, I think that's really very profound in how certain people, depending on obviously what their needs are, know that walk into your office, you don't know what they need until y'all start talking. You know, they can go through the phone consultations and the intake process, but until they're sitting in front of you, be it a person, individual, one single individual or a couple, you really don't know what you're really, really dealing with.
Yeah, that's true. So we do, like a lot of practices, we have a phone consultation where, just to kind of make sure we're funneling people through the right avenues. And, just because I'm a certified sex therapist doesn't mean that I specialize in all the areas of sexuality. An example is addiction. Like I'm not an addiction specialist, so don't see that. But yeah, I think, this is a big conversation that we have with people who are coming in. And one of the things that makes us really unique is that we do a very thorough sexual assessment and history taking process. So we look at, sexuality is complex, it's complicated. So we kind of take more of a complex approach to it. So we look at biological aspects, psychological aspects, social, relational, spiritual aspects, and then sexual aspects, and how those 5 pieces kind of come together, impact and influence a person's sexuality and sexual relationships, and how maybe, or I guess where or what contributing factors could be showing up in the particular sexual challenges and difficulties that people are coming in for. So, you don't know what you don't know, and so that's why we take a pretty thorough, assessment process to make sure that we can get in and take a peek under the hood and, get a good thorough history and not waste anyone's time. And I think that doing that helps us to help people have longer term results, that kind of thing.
Man, I don't think I could have said it the way that you just said it. Like, that was just really, really, man. And that just made me think about something too.
Yeah.
So we're going to pause really quick.
Sure.
Because we need to put out a disclaimer.
Mm-hmm.
Anna is not your therapist.
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
She's not claiming to be your therapist. So anything that's said is all for educational purposes and whatnot. So we just wanted to put that disclaimer out there. Because we don't need nobody talking about, well, this girl on this podcast told me that I'm supposed to do blah, blah, blah. We don't need those issues.
Yeah, no, there's definitely a line between learning and making some, tweaks, things you've read in books, things you hear in podcasts versus I think I need some individual intervention and like working with a professional, that kind of thing. So yeah, you're right. This is very much educational in nature. For
educational purposes.
Educational purposes too. Yeah. And so we've talked a lot about the counseling side. I also offer coaching services. Okay. So I'm a multidisciplinary provider. We have a lot of those at Aspen House, and I have the opportunity to do some coaching services as well. So on the coaching side of it, we would say it's more intimacy coaching and marriage coaching. I'm also kind of stepping more into the premarital realm, so offering some premarital coaching services as well, which I think the counseling experience that I have had greatly informs and shapes, setting up and creating this pre-engagement or premarital education and the program that we're working on there. So that's exciting.
Yeah, definitely. So whenever you're working with people, like, what's one of the first things that you're looking for? I guess, someone comes in and they're like, hey, or a couple comes in, they're already married, they've been together for some time, and they're like, yeah, our sex life is just trash. It's just not, she don't want it when I want it. And so we have a desire discrepancy there.
Yeah,
so
that shows up a lot.
How do we work that out? How do we navigate that?
Oh, you're opening a can of worms. That's a good question. No, that's a really good question. How I would approach that would be, number one, taking us like clinically or, even anytime you're going to problem solve something, I think it's important to make sure that you have a really good understanding of what you're problem solving. Yeah. And I think as like a side tangent here, I think as a culture, and just as people, we have a tendency to jump right into advice giving or problem solving or fixing it, like kind of taking that fix it mentality. I think taking a curious posture is probably one of the most important things. So taking a step back and being really curious. And, we are meaning-making people. We put meaning on everything. We do. And so as somebody, if somebody were to come in and say, I can't remember exactly how you said it, but what did you say? We have a difference in desire. She doesn't want it as much as I want it.
Yeah. She's not giving it up. She's not putting out.
Yeah, she's not. That's probably a good example because we probably hear that a lot. I don't know that I heard it quite like that, but I think there are a lot of questions I have about that statement in and of itself. Like, what meaning are you putting on, like putting out? So anyway, with that, I think a foundational piece, that I would encourage people to take a look at first is, what is your understanding or belief or theology of sex and sexuality? That in and of itself lays the foundation for what expectations you have of yourself and what expectations you have of your partner. So if there were anywhere I was going to start, that would be where I would start.
You said theology of sex.
I did say that.
Or sexuality.
Yeah.
How do those even go together?
What do you mean?
Like, well, whenever we hear theology, most of the time, sex isn't normally the word that comes after it. It's normally just theology. So, like the study of God, or I went to seminary, or we think of it in that light. Yeah. But whenever you put those two together, like theology of sex, what does that mean?
Well, my first question is, what does theology mean?
Okay.
Your theology, and I actually haven't looked up the definition of that, but your theology is your belief of. And I think specifically for people of faith who identify as believers who believe in God, right? foundationally, we believe that God is a creator and that God created everything, right? And so if God is a creator and he created everything, then he created your sexuality.
What? God created sex?
Yeah. Yeah.
I never knew.
I know. Shocker. I know. So, but, number one, I don't know that people really think about it that way. And then number two, if you pause and then you can align yourself with that idea, which to me, it's a pretty foundational idea, right? You have to then take it a couple of steps further and ask, okay, well, what does that mean? If God is this, if God created this, what does that actually say or mean about sex and sexuality? If it's something that God created, I want to know what he created it for.
Yeah.
Like I'm curious about that. I want to know more about that. And so as you continue to go down the rabbit hole and dive a little bit deeper, I think that's where you will discover your lack of theology or what theology you have. And again, I believe that those are foundational. Those impact and influence your expectations that you have for yourself, how your role as a partner, your role as a husband, your role as a wife, and the expectations you have for others and for your spouse.
I really feel like we can just stop there and be done with the podcast. Like we can
All
just
right,
wrap up
signing off. So nice to meet y'all.
Because there were so many different things that you said that were key and very foundational.
Yeah.
Because when we think of theology, it's our belief of something. And what is it do we actually believe? And then what informs that beliefs? Or what informs that belief or those rather beliefs. And so, obviously porn culture plays a huge role in how we what we believe and how we believe things about sex. It forms a lot of our education for sure. Obviously media, social media, music videos, TV shows, so on and so forth. And then just poor education. I think about I learned about sex and all this stuff in the locker room with the football team. So I learned about different things there. I learned about it through songs that I may have heard growing up. So, it's all of that formed my theology of sex or what I believe about 100%. Sex.
Yeah.
And I took a health class, but
sure. Well, that's probably the extent that a lot of people got. And then, where a lot of people got their education.
And then most of us as believers, our education in church was just don't do it.
Yeah. Abstinence, just don't do it.
Just don't do it.
Well, church, a lot of the just don't do it, I think, came from a fear-based mentality, which is very much influenced by porn culture.
And the purity culture.
So going back to what you're saying about porn, I think the porn industry has probably touched and impacted and influenced probably the majority of sexual education. From what I've learned, that seems to be accurate, including church and, purity culture, abstinence culture, because purity culture very much is foundationally based on this idea. It's like behavioral modification.
Behavioral modification.
Right. Do you know what I mean when I say that? It's here's a problem. We don't know how to solve it. We feel icky or weird about it. So let's just figure out how to change the behavior.
Yeah.
Kind of a thing. That's kind of what I've learned about purity culture. It's very much, hey, let's try and keep people on the straight and narrow by telling them what to do and how to be and how to act.
Man, instead of informing. Man, I think that's really good because I can't be informed by someone who doesn't know themselves.
Oh, 100%. Oh, yeah. Say more to that. I love that.
I really feel that whenever it comes to things like purity culture, well, I don't know how to articulate it.
Yeah.
I'm not well versed in it. I'm not very educated in it.
Yeah.
I just know that I was impacted negatively by porn. So I'm going to tell everybody else, hey, we're not going to do that.
Yeah.
Just don't. And then I'm going to do things like give you this purity ring as a symbol and bring God into it. And it's like God's not even in that.
No. Yeah, I think that's what is actually really sad to me about it is when God gets brought in and things are distorted. God's good and beautiful gift is actually being incredibly distorted and used for something. It is purity culture is fear-based.
Yeah.
And don't get me wrong, I'm not against some of the teachings of, I think there's an important place for abstinence. Like
Yeah.
I'm not knocking that at all. I want to be really careful and gentle as we talk about that.
Right.
And when you look at the harm that the purity culture movement had, it shows up in my office all the time.
Yeah.
And primarily it shows up, I see it a lot in a lot of negative influence in both males and females, but mostly in women. And it's it has perpetuated a lot of abusive, I believe, like power hierarchy types of mentality, power dynamics in relationships. I mean, as you continue to talk and like go down the rabbit hole here, you get further, I believe you get further and further and further away from scripture.
Yeah.
Right. So then you start to add in the conversation about roles and responsibilities. You start having conversations about submission and leadership and like what that actually looks like. And if you keep walking down that path, you're going to find definitions for it. But those definitions are starting to look at a lot less like Jesus.
Yeah.
Right. And that's concerning to me, especially when people ascribe to the belief and the value that that God is who God is and you know, who Jesus is and the Trinity and all of that. It's you look at these two things and they start to look very incongruent. So then I have questions, right?
Yeah.
And then what happens is you show up in a counseling office and you're saying, I'm having trouble in my sex life and I think it needs to be looking like this, but I also believe in this over here. And if you take a step back and you rewind the tape, I think it starts with your theology.
Man, that's so good. Oh man. Man, are y'all okay? Are y'all okay? Goodness gracious, Anna. That was really good. So when we look at it, you know, obviously when we consider sex, what it was created for, we have to go all the way back to, you know, like Genesis.
Yeah.
Whenever, you know, God, you know, said be fruitful and multiply. And so the way that I see that scripture now is, in other words, you know, you two perfect human beings who are created in my image and in my likeness.
Yeah.
Y'all come together and multiply my image and my likeness. So make more images of me. And I think that is so just parallel to what Jesus said in the New Testament. Go forth into all the ends of the world, into the ends of the earth, baptizing in my name and making disciples.
Yeah.
Making more images of me. And when we're informed by porn culture or we're in fear of something happening, and so we follow behind purity culture, which I think a lot of times it makes people feel like it's this badge of honor.
Right.
Like I did this and I should, you know, my sex life should be rewarding. It should be blah, blah, blah. We get further and further and further away from being the images of God that we're supposed to be.
Yeah, like the image that you're describing of like, okay, it starts here, right? Adam and Eve, two people, go forth, be fruitful, multiply, you know, have children, like multiply the earth, subdue whatever the earth. And what exactly are you teaching or like passing down? I think is really important, which just validates this idea of going back and ensuring that you have a solid understanding in theology. So yeah, I think that makes a lot of sense.
Man. So you have a couple and they have this desire discrepancy. Who's right and who's wrong?
Oh, that's a good question. I don't know that differences in desire is problematic.
Okay.
I don't think that having a difference in desire is an issue. I think the meaning making we place on it, and I'll go further than that because it's not just about meaning making. I think other relational issues can pop up from, you know, the meaning or, you know, from the sexual issues that you're struggling with, but I don't know that being different is a problem.
Being different is a problem.
I don't think in and of itself, like, you know, you may have one partner that, you know, has a higher sexual desire, just desires to have sex more often, and one that doesn't for a laundry list of reasons. You know, like that in and of itself isn't problematic to me or concerning. I think it's this The problem comes in when people start to have an issue, like they're noticing that they're having relational issues because of that. Right? It's this idea that like, well, something's wrong. We're not the same. Like we're supposed to be the same. Like, well, who told you you're supposed to be the same? Where did you learn that you were supposed to be the same?
Yeah.
And then also to kind of normalize, like, yes, are you in a, and this isn't the case for everybody. It's nuanced. Everyone, this is why this is not general advice. You know, but you know, we'll take or look at a lower sexual desire, you know, person for now. I could sit with someone who's struggling with lower sexual desire, end up normalizing their experience, right? And at the end of the day, help them to realize that just because they have a lower desire doesn't mean there's actually a relational problem because of that. The problem is probably because of something else.
Yep.
You know, your life ebbs and flows. You go through different seasons of your life, right? Like you and I are in seasons right now where we have little kids and it's just a very different context. Life just looks very, very different. And so the expectation that your sex life would look the same as it would when you were first married, or, you know, in 5 years, the expectation that your sex life is going to look in 5 years like it does today is just not realistic. But if you take the word sex out of it and you put a different word in there, like my vocation
right.
or something, you know, like it's going to look the same in 5 years that it is today. Like nobody would align with that. Right. So yeah, what was your original question?
Well, I didn't. I don't think I asked a question, but
get on these soapboxes.
It's fine. But you bring up something very fruitful in saying that we put sex on the throne of our hearts.
Oh yeah, for sure.
You know, we truly idolize it because we say, I hear men say this a lot. I need sex.
Yeah,
like, I need it. If I don't have it,
I know where you're going with this conversation.
If I need it, and it's like. Yeah. You don't. Are you going to die if you don't get any?
Yeah. Yeah.
You know, like.
That's a really hot topic in the field. Is sex a need or is it not? So that's a hot take. I don't necessarily disagree with it. But that's a conversation that a lot of people would split hairs over, or a word, the word need.
Need. Because it's like, well, we have to describe what need is and what need really means for you. Because... And I don't, you know, I created my own category of where I would place it. Okay. Like there's needs and then there are priorities and then there are wants.
Yeah.
And so I would say that like sex, maybe for some men, they say it's a need, but really it's a priority. And so that's that. I would say that in conversations with, you know, spouses, being able to articulate the fact that it's a priority and why I feel that it's one, and it's a priority that I believe should be respected or honored, blah, 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 or a priority that, you know, I would even ask for you to have grace for, then we can have conversation or dialogue. But the moment you put the title need on it, then, you know, we get into duty sex, pity sex, obligational sex. We get into, you know, abusive sex or forceful, manipulation, abuse. So again, we get further and further and further, as you were saying before, away from God's intent of it.
Yeah, so, I mean, that's a personal take I probably align a lot with too. I've just, similar to what you're describing, I don't know that I've sat with anybody who has, this is a hot take. Not a lot of people would like this, but I don't know that I've sat with anybody who has ascribed to that belief and has said that sex is a need and I need it. Yeah. Right. And how that and have they not had relational challenges or difficulties because of that? I know there are a lot of practitioners, coaches, counselors out there that would say the opposite. People I highly respect. Yeah. You know, who kind of have their own belief and understanding of this idea, but personally, I have not sat with anybody who would say like, yes, I believe that, and it hasn't had a negative effect on their relationship. And I think that's because if you kind of walk down the rabbit hole for just a minute, if it's a need, that means it's something, and maybe this is where it really becomes problematic. Okay, we're going to start with it's a need. Step number 2, what's your theology and belief and understanding of masturbation?
Yeah.
What's your theology and your belief of pleasuring yourself? Because if you're not okay with that, you are then putting potentially, I mean, we could probably tease that out a little bit more too, but then you are potentially putting a lot of expectation on your spouse to meet the need that you have, and you are now dependent on somebody or someone else in order to meet the need. I could probably get a lot of hate mail for that
Maybe
statement. So. Right. And there's nuances and different directions you could go, in that conversation. But when it comes to relational dynamics, when you place a need, like a personal need that you have on somebody else, you are creating a stitch or something between you that perpetuates this dependence. I think a lot of people are probably familiar with the term of codependence, co meaning two, right? But I think in marriages and relationships, there are a lot of things that we do that perpetuate or pull our spouse or our partner towards, and it feeds into the codependent type of relationship. I actually think most people struggle with codependence of some kind.
Yep, and don't even realize it.
And don't realize it. It's like the dependence is this idea that I need you to do or be something in order for me to do or be.
Yep.
Right. Yep. And so a lot of the work, I guess, taking the question that you had earlier, like, where do you start? We talked about theology. The other place I would start would be here. Yeah. Right. Like, what are some areas of your life that you are noticing that you are not a whole person, but you are a dependent person on your spouse or on your partner?
Man.
Right.
What is a whole person?
That's a great question. My natural response is like, well, what do you think it is? I think we were created to be dependent people. I think we were created to be dependent beings on God.
Yes.
And not on sinful, flawed humans, broken humans. And so to me, whole people is a lack of dependence. And don't hear that I'm very pro marriage. I'm very pro relationship. But I think healthy relationships are created whenever you have a healthy understanding of where one ends and where the other begins. So I'm talking about differentiation of self.
Right.
So I think a whole person has a whole identity wrapped up in what I would believe an identity in your faith or in your value outside of your relationship. Your value, your identity. It doesn't come from anything that could just crumble and break, like we're all going to die. Right. Right. And so if you're dependent on something that's going to crumble and break, I think that's where you become dependent. And the conversation can go in I could take this conversation in 5 different directions. I can hear a couple of people in my mind right now saying, well, what about food? Yeah. Well, what about water? And I would say those would be considered needs. Yeah. Right. And so in a way, we are dependent on those things. But my identity and my value as a person doesn't come from my need of food and my need of water. Right. And it's the same, I think, in relationships.
I think that's good because, to your point, you said that we are created. You believe that we're created to depend on things or depend on people. And the way that I heard it was, we're created to worship something. Yeah. We're created to worship. And, obviously with our beliefs aligning, we would say, well, that would be God. Yeah. But for some reason, we worship sex.
We do. Yeah. Well, we worship all kinds of things. Yep. Sex is just one of those really big things.
And so in us, we're looking for something to worship in exchange for validation.
I agree, yeah.
In exchange for being seen, being heard, or just being poured into, whatever it is. Yeah. We're looking consistently. Okay, did I do the job interview well? Yeah. Did I fix my car right? Yeah. Did I budget right? Yeah. Did I say the right things on the first date? Yeah. Did I get my vows right at the altar? Like, we're always checking for validation from one another, from people. Yeah. Because I do understand that we're always looking to poke holes at the same time. Yeah. And so it's like that hypervigilance. Yeah. Like we feel like we just got to be aware at all times. We got to make sure we do it right so no one can say anything. Right. Right. that kind of gets into my personal stuff.
Yeah. No, same. I identify a lot with that too, for sure. No, my mind was going off on a little tangent. I was thinking about, I think similar to what we were talking about before, like, where do you start? Like foundationally, theology is really important. I also think it's important to pay attention to the meaning making that you place on things. These relational needs, the validation that you are describing, like the needs that you have are important. And I think it can become problematic whenever your identity starts to get wrapped up around some of those things. So it doesn't dismiss the importance of them. Those are really impactful and really meaningful needs, like relational needs or nutrients that people have. And I think they have to be put in their proper place.
Yeah.
Right.
So how do we put them in our proper place? Like what does that look like?
Yeah. I think a good place to start would be getting curious, like I said before, about what those things. What, I'm putting that in quotes, what those nutrients are doing for you.
Okay.
And this is my kind of clinical, more conceptualization kind of coming out in play here. But yeah, I think validation isn't a good example. I think it does something for people. I think, I don't know. I think it can bring people closer together, and it can be something that helps to create trust and to build trust. But I also think people use good things for bad reasons. Does that make sense?
Use good things for bad reasons.
Yeah, using good things for bad reasons. So I'm trying to think of like a good example here.
Genesis 3, the fall of man.
There you go. Yeah, that's probably a great example. But it goes back to like the needs that we have, and what's interesting is the relational needs that we have. If you were to kind of compare it to like the food and the water kind of thing, like I do believe that we have needs. Like there are needs that we have. They're not just preferences or wants. Like there are actual relational needs that we have. But whenever we start to demand or we start to require people to meet those needs for us, I think it's no longer coming from a loving place. It's no longer coming from a place that has the opportunity to create fruit. It no longer comes from a place that can spread or to create unity.
Yeah.
I think when it comes from, so this is why looking at your heart, like your heart posture is really important.
Very.
I think instead it breeds disunity.
Yeah.
It breeds disconnection. It perpetuates dependence and codependence, which is, I think we could probably all agree is not a healthy thing. So yeah, going back to your initial question, like another place to start, I think, is looking at your heart posture. Like what's your feeling, your belief, or your motive or your incentive. We all naturally are very selfish people, and I don't know if that's necessarily always a bad thing.
Right.
But if that's kind of primarily where we're going or where we're coming from, I think we need to pay a lot of attention to how that could negatively skew, the unity that I'm trying to create, either in this relationship or in these relationships, or with the body of Christ or the world at large. So there's like 10 different directions we could go in that conversation, but yeah, unity was another word that just popped up for me. I think it depends on what your motivation is. What are you motivated by? What are you needing, and how are you trying to get it met? Are you manipulating? Are you coercing unintentionally? Sure, maybe. Like, let's just assume the best of people. And manipulation and coercion is never fruitful. Like that's not going to create unity or to create this beautiful interdependence in a marriage. So,
man, you said something about like demanding. I think a lot of times too, just my take, that the demand comes, or is even fueled rather, sometimes by a scarcity mentality.
Oh yeah.
Like,
yeah, that's fear.
I'm not gonna like get it ever again.
Yeah.
So, or the last time that we did it, it didn't turn out a certain way.
Yeah.
So it has to. So we this has to happen this kind of way.
Yeah, that's fear.
And you talking about too how that breeds disunity whenever we're supposed to be united. Obviously as a couple.
We want to be united.
Well, we
like
should
that's
be.
the goal. Like we want
And
that.
so unity is not the same as uniformity.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like we don't have to look the same or be the same.
Oh, preach that. Yes. I love that. Yeah.
We don't have to be exactly the same or the perfect match or whatnot to still be a unit, to still work together. So unity doesn't always look like uniformity.
Yeah,
and
I agree.
we have to be able to show grace for that.
I agree.
Grace for that. I'm different, you're different.
Yeah.
I'm higher, you're lower. You like this position, you don't like that position.
Yeah.
You like this time of day, you don't like this time of, however we want to nuance it. But again, the main thing is like the unity is more important because whenever we're operating as a unit and we're moving together, whenever we do come together, it'd be more pleasurable. We can be curious about it. We don't have these crazy expectations attached to it.
Yeah.
And so on.
Yeah. No, that's really good. I've seen a lot of couples that I've worked with. I think they would say that they believe that and they really want that, the unity part, and they're not necessarily looking. I think they wouldn't say that they're looking for uniformity on the front end, like when they're coming, right? Like I don't think they would say, well, yeah, naturally, like I want us to be the same and to look the same. I think they struggle with holding on to that and wanting to lead out from that.
Yep.
But I don't think they would really want that. And so when you really dive in and you kind of look at, you take the layers, you pull the layers back and you kind of look at some of that. I think what people are really struggling with is this idea or this belief that they're going to be left behind.
Yeah.
Right. And
FOMO, fear of missing out.
FOMO, 100%. And I think that falls into the scarcity mentality.
Yeah.
Like, oh my gosh, if I don't hold on to it really tight, or if I don't, manipulation and control is a natural coping, I think a lot of people lean into, right? When you feel out of control, you want to just hold on to and control whatever it is that you can.
Yep.
But I have a lot of compassion for that.
Yeah.
I have a lot of compassion for that because I don't really know why I do, but I guess I see and believe people's hearts. It does not take away from the impact that they have.
Right.
And if and when you are being coercive and or manipulative, I would call you out on that.
We need to have a conversation.
We need to have you said earlier, like, how do I beat people up? That might be one of the ways that I would quote and unquote beat people up.
She will slap your wrist. She will.
Because it's direct. It's going completely against what you're ultimately wanting and what, and as a couples provider, I'm coming at, approaching your goals for the goal being like the betterment of your relationship for unity, which is why, I'm not the best provider for everybody. Yeah. Some people are coming in and they're looking for someone to help them figure out whether they're wanting to stay or go. Like I'm not the person for you. I'm not the person to do that work. But anyway, yeah, I have a lot of compassion. I think that compassion, taking a step back, taking a curious posture of yourself and of your spouse those are really important attributes to hold when you're working through something really challenging. Sex is just a really good example. It's the one that we're using here, right? But if you are truly going to believe the best of yourself and believe the best of your partner, there must be a reason. Yeah. Right? Like there must be a reason why y'all feel so not unified.
Oh yeah.
Like why
separated.
Why you're struggling with that, right? There's got to be a reason for it. I think another thing that contributes to a lot of the challenges and the problems that show up is fear, right? And a lack of, it could be competence. Like I don't know how to pause and take a look inward and really look at some of these other underneath layers that could be contributing to, like, oh my gosh, am I demanding? I would never want to do that. But if I am, I want to know.
Yeah.
But I think that the fear I'm talking about is it's either, I think, fear and incompetence are kind of two different things. Either an incompetence, I don't know how to do that, so I need some help, or a fear of what you're going to find. And I think some people are even so detached from themselves.
Fear and incompetence. That's good.
Right? Like I think they're so detached from themselves that they may fear and they may not even realize that how they're coping with their fear. Example would be like withdrawing or something like that. Like I think there are some people that are so detached that they're not even aware that they're fearful.
Yeah.
And both of those things, like a lack of competence, like, well, that's naivety. Like you can't just rely on naivety.
Right.
Right. Like if the Lord is going to put something in front of your face, you are now, I think you have an opportunity and I almost said obligated, but that may not be the right word. I think you have an opportunity to do something with that.
Yeah.
Right? Go learn, pick up a book. Yeah. And if your partner is the one that's putting that in front of your face or they ask questions, I think you have a responsibility to pick that up and to do something with it. So incompetence is not a good excuse.
It's not.
You're still responsible for the impact that you have even when you're not competent. And I think fear a lot of times, when you're looking at like the withdrawn, like I'm so detached and I'm fearful, or I just don't know, maybe it's a combination of all of those things. Yeah. Also not a good excuse. Yeah. Like if you're struggling with being present or being in the moment with your partner, like, and someone's bringing that to you, I think you have a responsibility for the relationship. I would go as far to say, to be curious about it and to go seek some support and help to find out if that's really what's going on. Does that make sense?
Oh, it makes a lot of sense. And I think I kind of put them both together.
Yeah.
Like incompetence and fear. Maybe my fear fuels my incompetence. I'm so afraid I'm not even going to try to learn anything because for some reason, every time I try, it doesn't work. Or when I try to do this, he doesn't like that or she doesn't like that, blah, blah, blah. Or I'm incompetent. I don't know anything. So you know what? I don't want to mess it up. I'm not even going to touch anything. I'm not even going to try.
Yeah.
So I feel like they're two sides of the same coin.
Oh yeah.
And they fuel and motivate each other. Something you said was that basically, if the Lord were to put this in someone's face, you have an opportunity to really grab a hold of that.
Responsibility.
Like,
I think.
I find it interesting that we're quick to pray to God about financial issues, financial situations, or children, whatever. But if we were to swap that out for sex, why is that, I guess, such a challenging thing for us to, to pray to God for about how to navigate sexual relationships with our spouses? And it's like not so much the Lord, change her.
Yeah.
Make her want more or increase her sex drive.
Well, that's your understanding of what the problem is and how it should be resolved.
Right.
I think people probably don't lean into prayer, and maybe people do. I don't know. But for probably a variety of reasons, they either don't know how to do it, right? Or maybe similar, like they're scared. Like they're scared of what's going to happen, right? Because they're scared. Or maybe they're like detached, and I could probably identify myself in a couple of those categories too. Like not knowing how to pray, also not an excuse. Like if you don't know how, go learn. Go figure it out. Yeah. Being afraid of what could come from the prayer. Yeah. I don't know what that means. That feels very vulnerable and that feels out of my hands and out of control for me. Yeah. In an already out of control situation, like it's a very vulnerable thing, or what was the last one? I can't remember, competence and fear. Or maybe they don't know that they need to, and that probably goes back to like your understanding and belief of God, your theology of God and those kinds of things. So I don't know. There's a lot there.
It is. So do you think sex is talked about, I guess, in a manner that it should be when we're talking about premarital?
No, I do not. Let me say that loudly. No, I don't. It is not. It is not talked about as much as it should be. And when it is not, I don't believe that it is talked about in a healthy and an appropriate and a well I think a lot of people who speak on it are not educated enough to speak on it. And I want to say that with tenderness, because I in no way want to, harp on or be hateful towards people that are just trying to do good. And I think people who oftentimes lead out in trying to do good can do harm.
Yes.
Like just because you want to do good or you have a good heart doesn't mean what you're doing is good.
Yeah.
And so similarly, if you have a heart for premarital, do then take the responsibility of making sure that you're well educated.
Yeah.
I've heard a couple people say this before. One of our practice owners has talked about this a lot. Just because you have one experience and you've learned doesn't mean that doesn't mean that you have I don't want to say the right, but doesn't mean that you're well equipped to go preach to the nations about this one topic from your experience. Yeah. And I can't remember if I said this earlier or not, but sex and sexuality is complex.
Very.
It's complicated. People are complex and people are complicated. That complexity is not just left for sexuality. I mean, I think that goes across the board for a lot of aspects of humanity. And your experience is your experience. It doesn't necessarily mean that everybody has the same experience. And I also think we oversimplify it. Like we make it out to be something that it's not. It's when you oversimplify it or when you overcomplicate it.
Yep.
Which sounds kind of complicated to say it that way. What I mean, I think, and this speaks directly from my theology, I think sex is good, and I think sex is of God.
Yeah.
So that in and of itself is very simple.
Yeah.
Right. When overcomplicating it, we could probably get into a big rabbit hole conversation about that. But anyway, I think the answer to your question is no. I don't think it's talked about very well. It makes me really sad because a lot of the intervention work that I do in counseling and in coaching individuals, couples, even in family, like there've been family work that I've done where this has shown up. It stems from a lack of education. It stems from a lack of understanding, which is really sad to me.
Yeah.
Right? Because that's something that we have access to. Anyway, I feel like that's a soapbox. I can hop
that's
on
fine.
and
I mean,
talk a lot about.
you could have stayed on the soapbox because you hit on something very key. We end up teaching our experience.
We do.
And our experience becomes law. And then what happens? It turns into this thing called like purity culture.
Yeah, that's a good example. That's a really good example. Yes, it does. 100%. And purity culture is like one perspective. It's one mind. It's a way of solving a problem. So you have to ask yourself, like, well, what exactly is the problem that we're trying to solve? And I don't even know that I would agree with the problems that a lot of people would say are problems. An example being like kids being sexual. I don't think that's problematic. I am not saying that kids should go out and have sex with anything that moves. Like, I'm not saying that, but us being sexual beings, experiencing arousal, like having a desire, those are not bad things. Those are good things, but I think people, they get afraid of that. And purity cultures kind of come right in as a way, I think good intentions are there, and what is it? What's the saying? Like the pathway to hell is paved with good intentions or something like that. Maybe I butchered that saying, but anyway.
But I wanna hang out there for a little bit.
Yeah.
Because when we talk about we're sexual, what probably went off in a lot of people's heads were like, I'm attracted to every single human being that I see. Or I think that they're
Who's
sexy.
That person?
I'm just, that's probably because I'm thinking of from an uninformed and uneducated mind who may hear that we're sexual beings. So it's not that we're naked everywhere. We're being sexual, and that can even get into like feminism and me. Expressing my body and showing my body and me being proud of my body. And it's not and in your face type of thing that we're saying. But how would you break that down?
Yeah, I think when a lot of people hear the word sex or sexuality, they think of erotic sexual behavior. And that is one, I could argue, a smaller portion of what sex and sexuality is and what it means. We would not be breathing, we would not be talking or functioning without the sexual parts of our body. And I am not, an expert in all things anatomy. But what I've learned, what I'm familiar with, I've learned enough to know that what keeps our bodies running and what keeps our bodies going, it's connected to the sexual parts of our body. Our brain, I think, is our biggest sexual organ.
Yeah, we're not just talking about genitals.
No, we're talking about our whole body. I mean, let's talk about something a little bit more, quote, like innocent, like pregnancy and having children. I mean, that's a part of your sexuality, your gender, like how you would identify yourself as male or female or, anywhere in between, that is a part of your sexuality. How you interact with friends, how you interact with people is a part of your sexuality. And it's not erotic in nature.
Right.
You've got attachment and bonding. That's a part of your sexuality, and God created that. Like when you look at the attachment that you, like talking about something more innocent, like that you would have with a newborn. Yeah. Like that's a sexual relationship in nature. It's not an erotic one. Yeah. It's not a sensual one. The erotic and the sensual behaviors and the acts, I think, belong in partnered relationships, right? But that doesn't mean that you don't have them and that you're not a sexual being outside of a partnered relationship, right? Does that make sense?
No, it makes perfect sense. And, I wanted you to kind of slow down and slow walk that because when we hear sex, we instantly think penetration.
Yeah.
That's the first thing that comes to mind. Whereas it's like, that's just a small portion, to your point. That's, eroticism.
Yeah.
And eroticism is what's heavily promoted, what's heavily marketed, what makes a lot of money.
Yeah.
Hello, porn industry, music, blah, 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 all those things.
Yeah.
And it's like sexuality is so much more than just what's being, consistently fed to us.
No, I
Again,
hear you.
to your point, it's what God created. He created us. And our sexuality is a part of our whole person.
Yeah. 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 And I think that this kind of goes back to something we talked about earlier with what does it mean to be a whole person? What does it mean to be a whole person outside of your relationship? We were talking about that in the context of like dependence and relational dependence. But I think we can't run by this topic, pre-marriage, pre-engagement, sexuality, sexual relationships without talking about what it means to be a sexually whole person.
Yeah.
And I don't think that is something that's been taught. What does it actually mean to be whole outside of the erotic, genital to genital, experiences that we think of when we think of sex? Like, is that possible? And so I think that's where a lot of people in singleness struggle too, because they long for a good thing. They want a good thing and it's good. And we're not going to take that. Like, I can't take that away. I wouldn't take that away. Right. And when you go back and you look at like the heart posture behind it, are you motivated by this belief that you can't have a part of yourself without being connected to another person or without being sexually, erotically connected to another person? There's just so much of God's design, I think, that's distorted that way. I don't think God created us to be dependent on other people. Right. And so and not everyone would, align with that. But if that is what you do align with, then you have to take the thought pattern a little bit further and ask the question of like, well, what does that mean about my sexuality?
Yeah.
right? And then you have to go into, well, you don't have to, but questions of like, well, what do I do with my arousal?
Yeah.
What do I do with my desire? Again, those are parts of a whole,
Yeah.
but those aren't what make you a sexual being.
Yes, true.
So I think when you put those in their proper place and then get some good education about what's the difference between desire and arousal.
Yeah.
That in and of itself,
Yeah, we can hang out there for a little
understanding what arousal is takes some, I think it takes some pressure off. It's like, oh, it's not something that I am creating.
Yeah.
It's something that I am responding to.
Yep.
Right. And it's something biological that's just, that's happening in my body. Right. So it's not just because I'm getting aroused doesn't have to mean, because we're meaning making people.
Yep.
Anything super negative about, about ourselves.
Right. Whew. Arousal
and desire.
Arousal and desire. I think people just need to sit with that there. Just for a moment. Arousal and desire. Arousal being our response to something.
The physiological, like your body's response.
Our physiological response. And that means I don't have to necessarily be attracted to be aroused.
That's correct. Yeah. See how that in and of itself changes so much?
That changes everything. Right?
Because we're meaning-making people. We put meaning on everything. So imagine the sweet, poor 15-year-old boy or girl. I mean, it's a little bit, I have more compassion for boys because of how God created your body. And it's a little bit more outward facing. Right?
You
so
don't see us.
It's a little bit different, these poor boys, but just imagine, something happening or, getting an erection or getting aroused at school or in a public place and having to manage that. And like, what does that mean or say about me? I think it happens for girls too, but just in a little bit, it does happen. I don't want to negate that. Yeah. I think more of the meaning making, what does that mean or say about me as a person, that I'm getting aroused whenever I see a picture of da 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 da, or I hear, or I'm reading a novel, I'm reading a book, or I see something on TV, is that bad? Like, is my arousal bad? Yeah. Is me getting aroused bad? I am here to tell you, I know it's not bad. It's not sinful. It's not wrong. It's actually how God created you.
Yep.
And if that's true, then it can't be bad, which means that it's good.
It's good. Yep.
Oh no, what does that mean? Like, what does that mean?
Right.
Now,
I really love that you brought that out, because if, my body responds to said thing to the opposite sex, then that means that whatever God created, it's working the way that it's supposed to work.
My body's functioning the way that it needs to.
It means that it's doing what it's supposed to be doing.
It's user friendly.
Exactly. So,
which is a good thing.
So we have to be mindful and being careful about how us who may have seen the arousal or seen the physiological response of others, and we create a meaning around it. Yeah. And I think that, that's when it starts to become toxic. It starts to become perverted. It starts to become wrong, because we've created a meaning based off of what we saw. Yeah. And
can you give me an example? I have one. A meaning being like men are more sexual than women.
Oh yeah, definitely.
Because we get aroused more often than women do.
Right. So
how do you know that?
Because we can see it.
Oh, interesting. Good little scientific study there.
Right. Because we can see it. Whereas I believe, I don't know the numbers statistically, but women are just as much as aroused as men are. It's just that we don't outwardly see it, or it's more concealed because of how God created us. And even in that, culturally, there's a male-dominated version of sex, that we see or that we experience. And, our good friend, colleague, boss, big sister Jenna says this all the time. We have a male-dominated version of sex, and women are offered a male version of sex. Yeah. And maybe a lot of you fellas, the woman that you're with, your wife doesn't want sex because it's the sex that you're offering to her. Yeah. And so maybe you're offering her bad sex, and it's not the sex that, would better fit her because God created, us as men,
Mm-hmm.
my words are escaping me,
Yeah.
but more masculine,
Mm-hmm.
in a sense. What's the word I'm looking
With
for?
more of like a direct response, like a sexual response,
Right,
as opposed to a receptive.
right, exactly.
I don't think is that the right word, direct? Those words I lose those a lot too.
Yeah, so it's like more, men as we pursue,
Mm-hmm.
us as being more, us pursuing versus, women who
Mm-hmm.
were receptive, receiving.
Mm-hmm.
And the that gets funky because that feeds right back into desires,
Mm-hmm.
discrepancies.
Yeah.
Well, she didn't want blah blah blah, and it's like, well, maybe she wanted it,
Mm-hmm.
but then she changed her mind,
Or she wasn't ready.
or she wasn't ready, or wasn't prepared.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think one thing I would add to that too, if we're gonna ascribe to the complexity and the complex like idea of all of it too, is that it is very possible for men to have a receptive response and for women to have the other
Definitely.
too. I think it kind of just depends on the person. And there's a lot of different, when we're talking about sexual response cycles and like what that looks like, there are a lot of different types.
Yeah.
And that's kind of, I think, another myth that people have ascribed to, is this idea that like sex looks like one thing.
Yep.
It looks like I want it, I'm aroused,
Yeah.
I am pleasured, and I orgasm, and then there's that resolution. And it's just this very like linear doot doot doot, and like that's it.
Male dominated version.
Right. And so like when someone shows up, male or female, a lot of times it's female, like they show up to the table and they experience it very differently. What meaning are they putting on that?
Yep.
Like, what does that say about me as a like, what does that mean about me?
Yeah.
Or what does that mean about my spouse?
Yeah.
And if they're not this way, oh my gosh, who did I marry?
Yep.
Or, and that kind of thing.
Because they don't look like me. They're not the same.
Same.
They're not the same.
Which is just a ridiculous idea.
Or even to dig in that just a second, how much we idolize the orgasm too.
Yeah.
For some women, it's like, I just wanted the experience.
Yeah.
But I didn't need the orgasm at the end.
Well, orgasm is one part of a sexual experience.
But men, it's like we got to go in, we got to get the orgasm, and it's like, did the thing, boom.
Yeah.
And there's even like a sense of pride that comes with it. Like, I made her orgasm, or I made her body do this.
It's the meaning making, right?
Exactly.
Yeah.
And maybe she didn't want that. She was just good with just connecting and enjoying just the time and being with you. But again, we start to make these meanings, or it has to look a certain way, or if she doesn't orgasm, what's wrong with me?
Yeah.
Did I not do the right positions? Did I not do it right?
It's the meaning making. I mean, I'm telling y'all, the meaning making can go on for days.
Yeah.
It can. And that right there is like another, if you go back to the initial question you asked at the very beginning, like, where do you start? Like, where do you go after? That's another big one, is the meaning making. Like, you look at theology, you look at what your belief and your understanding of these things. I think there was another one I talked about. I can't remember what it was, but the meaning making is another one. Like, well, when you say, your reference at the beginning, like, my wife doesn't want it as often as I do, or however you said it, well, what meaning are you making of that?
Yeah.
And like, what does that mean for you?
No, that's really good.
If you can change the meaning of something, you can change your trajectory.
Yeah.
I mean,
definitely.
sometimes it's more complex than that, but, even in the complex situation, the more complex situations, there's always work to be done in the meaning making, and in the theology and the understanding and the belief and the education. I mean, there's always work to be done there.
Definitely. And one of the things that I've learned walking through this whole, because, I've been reorienting myself and re-educating myself about sex and rejection. And it's like, I had to learn that when Jasmine says, no, I don't want to have sex, she's not rejecting me. She's just rejecting sex. And
or connecting in that way.
Right. Exactly. And so what I had to learn, or what really convicted me in that was, wait a minute, have I made sex a part of my identity? And have I made that me and how I perform and how I see it and how it's supposed to be done? And so if she doesn't want it, then she doesn't want me. And that's not entirely true at all. It's actually far from the truth. And so, you know, being able to nuance just that small thing, you know, we talked about fear and education, or what was it?
Incompetence.
Fear and incompetence, arousal and desire, sex with me or not having sex with me is not the same as rejecting me as my whole person.
Yeah, that's true.
And so, you know, I'm looking at all of these small things that I'd say we bundled them together.
Yeah.
And they have to look a certain way. They have to be a certain way. And we walk away feeling empty, rejected. We have these huge fights and the marriage doesn't work. And it's all because
of that.
Because of the smallest things, that small piece that neither party truly understood.
Yeah.
So how do you think that would, I guess, how do you think that should be maybe approached in a premarital sense?
Oh, that's a great question. Yeah. I have thought about this a lot. In premarital or pre-engagement, I think it's important to start in the same place that we started with at the beginning. I think it's important for you to ask yourself the question of what your theology and your belief is of marriage, your theology and your belief. Like, why are you getting married? I think, yes, it's important to check some boxes and to for sure prepare, talk about expectations, those kinds of things. But if you're, in fact, talking about expectations, I think can be a caveat to some of these other, these other deeper level conversations, right? But yeah, that's where I would start. I would start with what is your belief? What is your theology? The approach that I typically take to premarital is very much informed by the couples coaching, you know, and experiences in couples counseling that I've done in the past. So I don't know, does that answer your question?
No, that does. And so I wanted to use that to, you know, kind of segue into
that's good.
You know, what we have going on.
Yeah.
And what we're doing.
Yeah.
So
we're doing fun stuff.
We're doing some fun things.
I'm excited.
Because something I realized is, and we talked about it earlier, premarital, it really isn't done well.
Yeah.
Isn't as thorough, isn't as educated.
Yeah.
And I had a friend, and I don't know if I shared this with you.
Yeah.
My boy Carrington. He was on the last episode.
Yeah.
But one of the things he said was, I'm putting people through premarital and I'm trying to break them up.
You did tell me that.
Like, my
you did tell
objective
me that.
is for y'all to go through this
Yeah.
and not get married and make that decision. Because if y'all can get through what I'm putting y'all through, then you'll have something to work with throughout your marriage whenever you do go through challenges and trials. Because the storms will come.
Yeah.
They're going to.
Right. Well, I love that. Like, the storms will come. And so a lot of premarital, pre-engagement work, pre-engagement is a little bit different. You're preparing for whether or not you want to get married.
Which I think
or whether or not
valid.
you want to get engaged. Yeah. Premarital, I think, is preparing you for not like what's going to happen, but helping you. I think it's helping you to feel equipped.
Yeah.
And how to know how to navigate difficult and challenging experiences together. It's about putting like, okay, now I am now mixing my life with another person and creating something new.
Yeah.
I'm creating a marriage, which is like a third party.
Yep.
There's me, there's you, and there's this third party.
There's us.
And there's us, right? Which I think is a healthy way of looking at it. That's that whole person kind of perspective. When you experience things as a married person, you have to navigate them differently. You have to, because there's a third party there that wasn't there before.
Yep.
Right? Like when you were single, even when you were dating, you were handling them very different. And so the skill of how to do that together is a skill that I think you need to learn. You don't just, I mean, you pick up on things from other people, healthy, unhealthy, but until you get a really good look at it and you understand what works and what doesn't work, what's healthy, what's unhealthy, you know, like you're kind of just, it's the blind leading the blind.
Yeah,
you know what I'm saying?
It
so
is.
I'm a very big believer, proponent of premarital work for that reason.
You know, and I find it funny that when we look at kind of how the wedding timeline and how it's planned, premarital is like one of those things that happens like as a, check, we went to premarital.
Yeah, for a lot of people it is. I don't think they value it. I don't think people value. Yeah.
You know, it's not valued. It's not appreciated. And again, I don't think it's a well-served area.
Well, I think they value it 5 years in when they're having
definitely
sexual challenges and they're looking for a faith-based sex therapist.
Right.
You know, I wish I knew that before. Yeah.
So, you know, I like to I guess poke the bear a little bit with people, and I'm like, well, what happens if the person that you're doing premarital with, what if they're like, yeah, y'all aren't ready? Then what?
Yeah.
You know, how does that, you know, how does that inform y'all's relationship then?
Yeah.
You know, I think about myself, future pastor.
Yeah.
And people have already, they've paid for the venue, they've paid for the food, and vendors are booked. And I'm walking through premarital with people and I'm like, y'all aren't ready. Yeah. And I'm not saying y'all aren't meant to be together. I'm just saying just not right now.
That's a hard conversation to have. So you're stepping outside of my profession because I actually don't do that.
Yeah.
I take the perspective of helping people figure out how to know if they are ready.
Yeah.
Right. I do a lot of equipping. You and I do together.
Right.
Like we'll do that in what we're working on. And I think your role as pastor is different than what I do, right? People are looking to you, and I think you have an opportunity to speak into people in that way. I approach it a little different. I do speak into challenges and concerns that I see, but I approach it from that perspective, not I think you should or you shouldn't get married. Sometimes I wish I could do that. Sometimes I kind of wish I could, but no. And if anything, I think one of the biggest aims I have in the work that I do is to help people figure out how to make these informed decisions for themselves. But you're hitting on a really important thing. I think there are a lot of people that truly just don't know what they don't know. And so they are looking for a mentor or a spiritual mentor or someone who can say, hey, can you speak into this on a more personal level? Right. I think that's where it would be appropriate to seek counsel and support from a mentor and things like that. Premarital counseling, I don't even want to call it counseling because a lot of what we do is coaching. It's premarital coaching work. It's equipping, it's educating primarily. And then, the more detailed one-on-one work or I guess two-on-one or two-on-two work that we would do would be more specific. So taking a look in particular at the unique dynamics, that are happening kind of between the two of them. But there is a special place when you're looking at like a multidisciplined approach. There is a special and very important place for spiritual leadership and spiritual guidance. And I just appreciate you bringing that up because that's something that I don't do. Yeah,
it's really hard to be like, I'm not seeing it. Yeah. I'm not seeing it.
I know. Well, that's a lot of weight. I can't even speak. I don't even know like what that would be like stepping into that space with someone. That's got to be challenging. Have you ever done that? Have you ever met with a couple who you thought wasn't a good fit for marriage?
Not yet. Not yet.
Are you anticipating it?
Oh, definitely. Yeah. Definitely. So pray for me.
Yeah. That's hard to imagine. That is tough. Yeah. And I think it's important and maybe from a similar approach, because you've kind of got your feet in both camps, right? Like you do the coaching, you do kind of the equipping and the educating and that work too. To start with, what do you think?
Yeah, right.
Like based on the work that we've done, like where do you feel like you're at? And I think it begs the question of how do you know if you're like, what does it actually mean to be ready to be married?
What does ready even mean?
Which I think is a good question, but I do think it's overly asked.
Yeah.
I think a lot of people want a short, easy answer. They want a checklist.
Yeah.
So what I'm hearing you talk about isn't the checklist. You're talking more. I think you're speaking more like deeper level.
Yeah. There's that question, are you ready to get married? I think it's also asked by the wrong people.
I think it is. Yeah. Asked by the wrong people. I do think too it's asked by people who just they want to do it well and they don't know how to do that. And so often I see people they don't ascribe to the legalistic or the earning prosperity kind of gospel or that kind of a thing. And yet when they step into some of these like unknown topics or unknown conversations, they seek a simplified answer. It's so complex. I don't know a whole lot about it. Like, do I meet the criteria? Yeah. Well, there's actually not a criteria to meet.
Right.
It's complex. It's more complicated than that. But yeah, that's an interesting perspective, for you to take.
Yeah. So, Anna, what do we have going on?
What
are we working on?
Yes, let's talk about the fun stuff. So Spoon, I'm just gonna share my little story and how you kind of popped into it.
Okay.
If that's okay. I, for the last probably 5 years or so, have thought about and have pondered creating a premarital program and creating content, to work with couples for pre-engagement and premarital. For a laundry list of reasons, I just don't think I've been ready. It hasn't really been a good time. And so I haven't actually, I have now, but like I hadn't done a lot of work to get the project off the ground. So I am now in a position where I'm taking some additional steps to really start getting this project off the ground. And what was it, like a couple months ago? You'd reached out to me and you were like, hey, like you want to work on some of this together? Are you looking for a partner to do it? And it just seemed to make a lot of sense. So I'm excited. Spoon and I are working on figuring out, what this partnership could look like. But essentially, we are working on creating a premarital program together.
Yeah. And I'm really excited about it because, full transparency, I've been with Aspen House a year and a half now, which is crazy how time is flying. And I've been able to serve people, but I really hadn't figured out, like, where's my place?
Yeah.
And what I enjoy serving. That's just my heart's posture. I love to serve, but I couldn't find my place.
Yeah.
And so until we were having a consultation meeting one day and we were talking about it, and I was like, I think premarital is my thing. I really do. And so, yeah, y'all. So Spoon and Anna, we're working and we're building a premarital program at Aspen House. Got a couple of things coming down the pipeline. But we will be doing some speaking, kind of sort of, I guess, similar to what we did today, but do some speaking about premarital, sex, all these different things in different places. So holler at us and let us know. We can come by and do some equipping at your spot.
Yes, we can. We would love to do that for sure. I think that's my favorite part of the work is actually getting in and working with the people. Yeah. That's why it's taken me so long to really get a lot of this off the ground. It's the administrative and that kind of thing. But no, you've been very supportive, very encouraging. You've kind of relit some of the fire for like, okay, let's get this stuff going. There's a lot of content that I think we probably have to pare down a little bit. But we're looking at creating something really, really cool, really special. So I'm excited.
Yeah. It's gonna be good, and the thing that I love about it the most is that people are gonna be equipped. God gets the glory out of it. Yeah. We get to help save marriages before they start.
Hey, little plug there. There's a little plug there.
I didn't try to do that.
You
but
it's like a plug. That's funny.
Oh man. So yeah, so you guys stay tuned. Be on the lookout for that stuff, man. We'll be sharing that with you guys here pretty soon. Anna.
Yeah.
thank you for coming on to the podcast,
You're
to
so
the Left Hand Gang.
Thanks for having me.
So how'd it feel? How'd it feel?
This is fun.
Yeah.
I enjoyed it.
Yeah.
Yeah. You're easy to talk to.
I'm glad.
You're my buddy. Yeah. You're fun. You're always a good time.
I'm so glad. Thank you for sharing your gift with us.
You're
We
welcome.
appreciate you so much.
Absolutely.
How can people find you, get services, all of that stuff?
Same way they can find you and get
Really?
services. Yeah, you can go to our website. So
Yeah.
I'm on Instagram as well. Anna Stubbs, LMFT.
Stubbs with 2 B's.
Stubbs with 2 B's, STUBBS. And then on our website, it's Aspen House, HAUS Associates.com.
Man. So yeah, y'all go holler at my girl Anna so she can help you fix your life, fix your marriage, and you can go back home happy, whole, and safe. But thank you so much again, Anna.
Yeah,
We appreciate you
Yeah.
so much. All right, y'all. We appreciate y'all coming, hanging out with the gang. We love y'all, and we'll see y'all soon. Be easy. Peace. Thank y'all so much for tapping in with the Left Hand Gang podcast.
Be sure to follow, like, subscribe, and rate us.
And lastly, please don't forget to check out our website. That's lefthandgang.co for merch and ways to stay connected.
Catch you next episode.
Gang.